Knock it off.
What? Tough guy?
In the vast expanse of space, long before Earth civilizations began, existed Krypton. Its inhabitants resembled humans but possessed capabilities far beyond anything we could imagine. On this extraordinary planet, in what would become a historic moment, a woman labors to bring new life into existence. Her husband, Jor-El, stands beside her, supporting her through the delivery. This event is nothing short of revolutionary. You see, Kryptonian society had long ago abandoned natural reproduction. For countless generations, every child had been artificially engineered in genetic laboratories. But this baby, this precious boy being born naturally. Yet even as this miracle unfolds, catastrophe looms overhead. Deep within the planet's core, devastating failures are occurring. Understanding that time is running out, Jor-El abandons his wife's side and rushes toward the chamber where Krypton's ruling council convenes. He bursts in, desperately pleading with them to grant him access to the Codex, an invaluable technological marvel that contains the complete genetic blueprint of every Kryptonian who has ever lived. The chamber doors explode inward. General Zod strides in with military precision. With cold authority, Zod announces that the Council's power has ended. He declares that their constant political debates and bureaucratic paralysis have directly led to Krypton's current crisis. He demands that Jor-El join his coup, but Jor-El sees clearly what his former friend has become. The confrontation escalates until Zod's forces arrest him and drag him away. In the chaos that follows, Jor-El manages to slip away from the conflict. Racing against time, Jor-El navigates through Krypton's collapsing infrastructure and successfully retrieves the Codex from its secure location beneath the central governing hub. He brings this priceless artifact to a hidden sanctuary where his wife, Lara, waits with their newborn son. Together, they make an audacious decision that will alter the course of history across multiple worlds. They integrate the Codex's complete genetic database directly into their infant son's cellular structure. Every strand of Kryptonian DNA that has ever existed is now encoded within the single child. Meanwhile, Lara has been searching through space for a suitable refuge, a world its inhabitants call Earth. They name their son Kal-El and prepare a small spacecraft for his interstellar journey. The spacecraft's engines begin their power-up sequence. But before the launch can complete, Zod arrives with his elite soldiers. Zod is stunned when he learns about the natural birth, something he hasn't witnessed in his entire lifetime. He orders his forces to destroy the escaping vessel, but Jor-El stops him and they start to fight. Jor-El injures Zod, and as Kal-El's ship achieves launch velocity and rockets away from Krypton's surface, disappearing into the cosmos. Enraged, Zod stabs Jor-El and he dies. He orders his men to take down the vessel, but the Council's military forces surround his position. He threatens that he will search the entire universe if necessary to reclaim what Jor-El has taken. His coup has failed. He and his followers are sentenced to 300 cycles of Amatic reconditioning within the Phantom Zone, a prison dimension of endless darkness. Lara watches the proceedings with somber acceptance. Someone asks if she'll seek shelter from the impending destruction, but he knows the truth. There is no shelter, no escape from what's coming. Moments later, the entire planet explodes in a cataclysmic blast. Kal-El's tiny spacecraft survives, and it continues its programmed journey toward its distant destination. The narrative then jumps forward to present day on Earth. The baby who escaped Krypton's destruction is now a grown man living under the name Clark Kent. One afternoon, the ship's radio crackles with emergency broadcasts. Nearby, an offshore oil drilling platform has caught fire. Clark doesn't hesitate. While everyone else stands frozen listening to the broadcast, he takes action. He leaps from the ship and crosses the distance to the burning rig with impossible speed. Without regard for his own safety, he smashes through reinforced metal doors and plunges into the inferno. One by one, he locates the trapped workers and carries them to safety. As the structure begins its final collapse, Clark ensures that every single person escapes alive. The rig disintegrates around him. Clark sinks beneath the ocean's surface as twisted metal and debris rain down from above. Underwater, submerged in the dark, quiet depths, memories from his childhood begin flooding through his consciousness. Without warning, his senses had intensified beyond control. He could suddenly hear every conversation in the building simultaneously. Panicked and unable to cope, young Clark had fled the classroom. He locked himself inside a dark storage closet, pressing his hands against his ears, trying desperately to make it stop. The school had contacted his mother, Martha Kent. She arrived and found him huddled in the darkness, trembling. She taught him a technique to imagine her voice as the only sound in the world, to picture everything else fading away like water draining from a tub. Gradually, following her guidance, Clark's panic subsided. He emerged from the closet and collapsed into his mother's embrace. Back in the present, Clark surfaces from the ocean. To avoid questions and attention, Clark steals some clothing from a nearby line and walks away before authorities arrive. As he travels down a coastal road, he passes a school bus. The sight triggers another powerful memory from his past. Years earlier, Clark had been riding that same bus route home from school. A bully named Pete Ross had been tormenting him. Clark had endured it silently, as he always did. Then disaster struck. The bus driver swerved, lost control, and the vehicle plunged off a bridge into the river below. Children screamed in terror, struggling against their seatbelts as the interior filled with water. While everyone panicked, Clark remained calm. He swam to the emergency exit, tore it completely off its hinges as if it were made of paper. With strength that should have been impossible for a child, he pushed the entire vehicle upward, lifting it from the riverbed and propelling it toward the surface. Clark had emerged from the water completely soaked, his incredible feat witnessed by multiple people, including Pete's mother and another parent named Lana Lang. While Lana and others had praised divine providence and miracles, Clark's adoptive father, Jonathan, understood the dangerous truth. Clark's secret had nearly been exposed. That evening, they'd had a difficult conversation. Young Clark had been confused and frustrated. He'd asked his father what he was supposed to do, just let his classmates drown. Jonathan had taken Clark to their barn and shown him the spacecraft, the undeniable proof of his alien origin. He'd also shown him a mysterious metallic object that had been found with the ship. Jonathan had explained his philosophy to Clark. Humanity isn't ready yet. If Clark reveals his abilities prematurely, fear and misunderstanding could lead to disaster. But someday, when the time is right, Clark will be able to show the world who he truly is, and they'll be ready to embrace him rather than fear him. So Clark had taken his father's advice to heart. He'd spent years drifting from place to place. At one point, he'd worked as a server at a roadside bar. One evening, a drunk patron had been harassing a waitress named Chrissy. Clark had intervened calmly, asking the man to leave her alone. The drunk had laughed him off, but Clark's quiet intensity had eventually convinced him to back down. Later, after closing, the drunk man found his truck completely destroyed. Clark had simply walked away. Meanwhile, in Antarctica, something extraordinary has been discovered. A journalist named Lois Lane, who works for the prestigious Daily Planet newspaper, has traveled to this frozen wasteland to investigate. Military personnel are conducting an excavation of something massive buried deep beneath the ice. Clark is also present at the site, though in his typical fashion he's taken the most inconspicuous job available. Lois is naturally curious and professionally skeptical. She challenges the military officials, demanding transparency about what they've found. The generals dismiss her concerns with rehearsed answers, insisting this is just a routine scientific investigation, but Lois notices inconsistencies in their story. That night, Lois notices Clark slipping away from the main camp. Her journalistic instincts take over and she follows him at a distance, staying hidden in the darkness. Eventually, he breaks through into a vast hidden chamber. There, preserved perfectly in the ice, sits a spacecraft of completely alien design. Lois continues following, overwhelmed by what she's witnessing. Around his neck, Clark wears a small metallic key. When Clark inserts this key into a console on the ship, the entire vessel suddenly powers up. An three-dimensional image of Carl's father appears. Clark stands frozen, staring at this apparition of his biological father. Following the hologram's gestured directions, Clark moves deeper into the ship. Behind him, Lois has managed to slip aboard unnoticed, but the ship's security protocols detect her presence. Without warning, a defensive mechanism activates. Clark hears her scream and reacts instantly. He crushes the machine with his bare arms and checks Lois, but she's already been injured. There's internal damage and she's bleeding. Gently, Clark uses his heat vision with surgical precision, cauterizing the wound and stopping the hemorrhaging. The ancient Kryptonian vessel rises from its icy prison and disappears into the sky with Clark aboard, leaving no trace behind. Lois regains consciousness and a helicopter arrives to rescue her. She rushes back to civilization and immediately pitches the story to her editor, Perry White, at the Daily Planet. But Perry refuses. He explains that publishing such a story without irrefutable proof would cause mass panic. Frustrated but undeterred, Lois decides to leak the information through alternative sources. She contacts another journalist she trusts and provides them with everything she's gathered. Meanwhile, aboard the Kryptonian ship, Clark stands before the holographic Jor-El and asks the question that has haunted him his entire life. Who am I really? The AI responds with wonder, expressing how remarkable it is to see Jor-El's infant son now standing fully grown before him. The hologram begins explaining Krypton's history, how their civilization had spread across the stars millennia ago, establishing outposts on countless worlds, using massive terraforming machines to reshape alien environments into habitable Kryptonian colonies. He describes how General Zod, once their greatest military leader, had eventually launched a coup attempting to seize control of the government. He explains the artificial birth system and why Kal-El's natural conception was so significant. It represented freedom, the possibility of choice, the idea that a child could dream of becoming something other than what society had predetermined. Jor-El's hologram shows Clark the symbol emblazoned on the ship and explains that it's the crest of the House of El. In their language, this symbol means hope. The hologram tells Clark that he was sent to Earth not just to survive, but to inspire. He's meant to give humanity something to aspire toward, to demonstrate what they could potentially become. Lois hasn't given up her investigation. She identifies patterns in news reports of unexplained rescues and mysterious interventions. Following these breadcrumbs, she eventually tracks down his hometown and identifies Martha Kent as his adoptive mother. Lois visits the Kent family cemetery and discovers Jonathan's grave. While she's standing there processing what she's learned, Clark appears behind her. He asks her directly why she's been following him, why she can't just let him live in peace. She tells him that she knows what he's capable of, that his abilities could help countless people. In response, Clark shares the most painful memory of his life, the day his father died. Years earlier, Clark had been a teenager struggling with his purpo. In a moment of cruel thoughtlessness, he'd told Jonathan that he wasn't his real father. The words had wounded Jonathan deeply, but he tried to explain that he and Martha had been doing their best. Their conversation was interrupted by a crisis. A massive tornado had appeared on the horizon, bearing down directly on the highway. Jonathan had helped people evacuate, guiding them under an overpass for shelter. But in the chaos, their dog was trapped in the family car. Jonathan had run back to save the animal. He'd succeeded in freeing it, but by then the tornado was upon them. Clark had started to move, ready to race out and save his father, but Jonathan had stopped him. Clark had watched helplessly as the tornado consumed his father. He tells Lois that he let his father die because Jonathan was convinced that the world wasn't ready. Deeply affected by this confession, Lois returns to her office and tells Perry White that she's abandoning the story entirely. Clark, feeling emotionally raw after sharing his story, goes home to visit Martha. She's overjoyed to see him. He explains that through his journey with the Kryptonian ship, he's finally discovered his true identity and where he came from. Martha feels both pride and fear, pride in the man he's become, but fear that now that he knows the truth, he might leave Earth behind entirely. But Clark embraces his mother and reassures her that Earth is his home. He's not going anywhere. Military installations around the world simultaneously detect unusual activity. Satellite systems pick up massive objects approaching Earth from deep space. Before anyone can formulate a response, every power grid on the planet suddenly fails. Communication networks collapse. A transmission broadcasts in every human language simultaneously. A deep, commanding voice delivers a chilling ultimatum. Someone named Kal-El has been hiding among humanity. Unless he surrenders himself within 24 hours, Earth will face unimaginable consequences. Citizens demand answers about who Kal-El is and why an alien force is threatening their planet because of him. The journalist Lois had shared her research with Seize an Opportunity and broadcasts everything Lois discovered. Within hours, FBI agents and military personnel surround Lois's home and take her into custody for questioning. Clark finds himself at a crossroads. He speaks with a priest, wrestling with the impossible decision before him. If he surrenders, there's no guarantee that Zod will keep his word and spare Earth, but if he doesn't, innocent people will certainly suffer. The priest tells him that sometimes faith requires taking a leap. You trust first, and understanding comes after. Clark makes his decision. He walks into a military installation voluntarily, allowing them to place him in handcuffs. They bring him to an interrogation room where Lois is also being held. To prove his peaceful intentions, Clark effortlessly breaks the handcuffs restraining him. He addresses the military personnel calmly, explaining that he's lived on Earth for 33 years without harming anyone. The military escorts Superman and Lois to the designated meeting coordinates. A massive Kryptonian warship descends from the clouds. Two soldiers emerge, fierce warriors in advanced armor. They demand that both Superman and Lois Lane be handed over immediately. The military attempts to intervene, but Lois steps forward voluntarily, not. Lois is given a breathing apparatus since the ship's environment would be toxic to humans. Superman, however, begins to weaken almost immediately. General Zod appears, looking down at Superman with a mixture of contempt and pity. He explains how Earth's environment has made him soft, vulnerable. Then Zod reveals his true plan. He intends to use massive terraforming machines called world engines to transform Earth's entire ecosystem into a perfect replica of Krypton. Humanity will be exterminated in the process, but a new Kryptonian civilization will rise from the ashes. Zod demands to know the location of the Codex. Superman realizes the horrifying truth. The genetic information stored in his own cells is what Zod needs to resurrect the Kryptonian race. While Superman remains weakened, Lois is locked in a separate chamber. She remembers the command key Clark gave her before they boarded the ship. Desperately, she activates it. Instantly, Jor-El's AI manifests throughout the ship's systems. The holographic Jor-El alters the atmospheric composition. Jor-El guides Lois toward an escape pod while simultaneously creating diversions to confuse Zod's soldiers. Superman, breathing Earth's atmosphere once more, feels his strength returning. Lois reaches an escape pod and launches it toward Earth, but the small craft sustains damage during atmospheric re-entry. Fire spreads inside the pod as it begins breaking apart. Superman sees her falling and rockets through the sky. He tears open the disintegrating pod and catches Lois just seconds before impact. But while Superman was aboard Zod's ship, the General's forces located Martha Kent. They discover the location where Jonathan Kent hid the spacecraft years ago. When Superman arrives to defend his mother, a massive battle erupts. Zod had difficulty in breath because of the Earth atmosphere. His team arrives and takes him back to the ship. Zod's most elite warriors engage Superman in combat that devastates the surrounding area. The military arrives and with heavy weaponry they start firing, but Zod's elite warriors destroy all the heavy weaponry. Clark fights with Zod's elite warriors. The whole city is in a complete destruction. The military, instead of targeting Superman, the soldiers lower their weapons. They've chosen a side. Superman isn't the enemy, he's humanity's defender. A Kryptonian scientist informs Zod that after analyzing Superman's blood samples, they've discovered the codex is encoded within his genetic structure. Zod realizes Superman doesn't need to be kept alive. They can extract everything they need from his corpse. Zod activates the world engines. Two enormous machines descend, one in Metropolis, another in the Indian Ocean. They begin their terrible work immediately, firing energy beams that reshape reality itself. Gravity intensifies, crushing buildings and people. The atmosphere begins changing, becoming toxic to human life. Lois arrives at a military command center with critical information. If Superman's original spacecraft collides with one world engine, it will create a singularity, a miniature black hole that will consume both devices and everything connected to them. The military mobilizes immediately. They load Superman's Kryptonian arrival pod onto a C-17 transport aircraft. The plan is to ram one world engine while Superman manually destroys the other. Superman flies toward the Indian Ocean machine at maximum speed. But as he approaches, the gravitational manipulation intensifies exponentially. He's driven down, crushed against the ground by force equivalent to dozens of Earth gravities. He can barely breathe, barely move. The AI consciousness confronts Zod, warning him that his obsession with rebuilding the past will only lead to more destruction. Zod, refusing to listen to reason, commands the AI to be deleted permanently. Before Clark's consciousness fades completely, Jor-El's last words echo through his mind. With a primal shout, Superman rockets upward and tears through its machinery with his bare hands. The machine shudders, sparks, and finally explodes in a spectacular cascade of energy. Meanwhile, the C-17 carrying Superman's pod approaches the Metropolis world engine. Zod sees the military's plan and moves to intercept. He attacks the aircraft directly, attempting to destroy it before it can complete its mission. But Superman arrives just in time. He intercepts Zod and the two Kryptonians clash in midair. They're evenly matched, both possessing godlike strength and speed. The C-17 completes its mission and the pod collides with the world engine. It begins pulling everything into its gravitational vortex. All of Zod's soldiers and equipment gets consumed by the artificial black hole and it vanishes. Only Zod remains and he's utterly broken. His entire reason for existence was to protect and preserve the Kryptonian people. Zod attacks with pure hatred, no longer caring about tactics or victory. He simply wants to make Superman suffer. Their battle crashes through buildings, putting countless civilians at risk. Superman tries desperately to minimize casualties, to move the fight away from populated areas, but Zod deliberately targets innocents. Finally, they crash into a train station. Civilians are trapped, unable to escape. Zod's eyes begin to glow. He's going to use his heat vision to massacre everyone in sight, forcing Superman to watch. With tears streaming down his face, Superman does what he's never done before. He uses his strength to kill. He snaps Zod's neck and the general's body falls lifeless to the ground. Superman collapses beside the corpse, overwhelmed by anguish. This was the first time he'd ever taken a life. The weight of that action, necessary though it was, crushes him emotionally. Sometime later, a missile crashes to Earth near a command installation. Superman arrives and calmly explains that surveillance will no longer be tolerated. He wants to help humanity, to be their ally, but on his own terms. He won't be controlled or monitored. If they attempt to track him again, he'll systematically destroy every spy satellite they launch. It's not a threat, it's a boundary being established between equals. The film's final scenes show Superman visiting Jonathan's grave with Martha. He tells her it would have been wonderful if Jonathan could have witnessed everything that happened. Martha assures him that Jonathan would be incredibly proud. She asks about his plans for the future. Clark explains that he wants to work somewhere that keeps him informed about global events, somewhere he can identify crises quickly and respond to them. He's going to embrace his human identity while using his abilities to help people. The movie ends with Clark Kent arriving at the Daily Planet for his first day as a journalist. He walks through the busy newsroom and Lois Lane looks up from her desk. Their eyes meet, and she smiles warmly, welcoming him to the team.